What's up everybody, welcome back to the video. If you're wondering why I'm out of breath, I've done a set already. Don't judge me. People always comment on my breath, so there we go. Today we're going to talk about the training specifically. What is the training program that I am going to be running over the next probably like 3 months, at least the end of this year, in order to kind of bring up what I need to bring up based off my judges' feedback, based on where my physique needs to go, based off my category. And we're going to talk you through that as we go through this. So I'm going to warm up a bit, let the juices flow, let the pre-workout settle in, and I'm going to talk you through kind of like where we start with volume, baseline, because we will be manipulating volume this time, and I'll talk to you how. So the approach this year with training volume, is going to be slightly different, though more of the same. Those of you guys who followed me for the last few years, you guys know that I train to failure. I train everything to the maximum capacity that you can in that one set, which is why you see me struggle all the time. You see those faces on YouTube all the time. In doing that, naturally volume's going to be low. So there's going to be no like 3, 4, 5 sets and incrementing them up to like 7 or 8 sets. I'm still going to have very much the same kind of spine, but we are going to manipulate volume. So it's going to come in 3 phases now. In these 3 phases, you're going to have week 1 to 2, week 3 to 4, week 5 to 6. And in doing that, across those phases, we're going to slowly but surely increase volume. Number 1 is going to be MEV, minimal effective volume for growing. So that's going to be, anywhere from 1 to 2 sets, mostly 2 sets across all these compound exercises and also the isolation exercises. And that is ultimately where we're going to start. When we come into phase 2, that is when we're going to start to tag on a set here and there on energy efficient exercises. So I'm not going to go tag on a load of sets to hack squats, leg presses, because they are going to massively tax you. And yes, we want to do that, but we don't want to accumulate volume like too quickly. So there'll be like sets on, for example, a pec deck, let's say for example a leg extension, and we'll just have another straight set on there. Then we'll come into the final phase, which is going to be like the highest volume phase. This is where we'll start to bring in drop sets. This is where we'll start to bring in maybe myo reps, maybe rest pauses, and then we'll throw those onto the compound exercises like leg presses. But still the safer ones, when we're thinking about it, we're still going to be focusing on the safer ones, and that is when we're going to extend that volume. So basically lowest volume, a little bit more volume, the most volume that you can do and still recover. You might overshoot it, which means you'll have to pull it back. And then finally, we'll just deload. And that deload will come very much on when I feel like I need it. That's a good start. Don't do any more of that spot. Jesus. So when we do talk about that volume, it's important to know that like I've sort of worked out what works for me over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of the amount of volume. I did a long stint doing only 4 or 5 sets of chest. My chest didn't grow that much, so I started to push towards 6 or 7 or 8 per week, that is, and it started to grow more. I've always done pretty kind of moderate to high volume on my back, so me working to failure, doing moderate to high volume it's pretty solid all around. So this volume, I actually think you could probably use it as like your starting volume, but you really need to just ask yourself and track, are you progressing? Yes, maybe you could do a bit more. And there will be a point when if you're training to failure and all the metrics are the same, form, intensity, like proximity to failure, really the only thing that would need changing would be volume. And by volume I mean the amount of sets, really. So if all those metrics are the same, you've added a set in, they're still the same, you add a set in, they start getting a bit worse, all right, well, then you can start to pull back a bit, and that's kind of like your maximum tolerance. And then you could just play between those boundaries. So something else that you want to be considering when you're looking at your training program is like your overall goal, right? Now me, I'm obviously IFBB Pro men's physique, right? Men's physique. I wear shorts. I literally cover my legs. So I don't really need to train them that much. Fortunately for me, my legs grow minimum volume, right? So that's why we only have that one session of legs a week. And you'll see that from the structure of this, going into that kind of push and arms, pull, shoulders and arms, rest, chest and back, which is today's session, and then legs, you can see that there's a big focus on this bigger upper portion of my back. And ultimately, the men's physique poses, right? I want to make this look better. I want to make this look thicker, fuller. So you'll see that the way these programs are designed, which we will talk about after the session, is geared towards my category. Doesn't mean that you need to do that if you're someone who doesn't want to choose a category. You just got to think about your overall goal, and also how developed you are in those areas, and then design your program around that. Is this way too heavy? Never be afraid to admit when it's too heavy. Because I usually am. Ow. So guys, I may well get some questions about having low volume, because it's still a low volume based program but high intensity, and those two things are very interchangeable. High intensity, low volume. Middle intensity, middle volume. Lower intensity, higher volume. And volume we just mean by amount of sets. This is like something that's debated in the industry over and over and over again. I honestly just think if that relationship is in sync, it doesn't make a fucking difference. You're going to grow really well. Just find the one that suits your genetics, maybe. Some people might react to the heavier stuff. Some people might react to that higher volume stuff in terms of more sets and blood volume. Genetics in terms of your personality. Do you like to get after it? Do you want to go to failure? Do you like to be more reserved, more methodical about things? And all of those things come into your decision of where your intensity and where your volume lies. For me, I'm high and low most of the time. Oh shit, man. So now I actually want to take some time and take you through these sessions. We've done this a few times before, so we will bring this up on the screen for you so you guys can see. But I'm going to take you through one of every session and then just briefly talk about the manipulation in volume and why we've set things up. So day one, Monday, push and arms. So this is the chest dominant day, because what you'll see later on, we do have a delt dominant day, but there's still a significant amount of delts in here. So we start off with a pec fly. You guys have seen this many times before. Warm up. Then we go into a big press. First press, always thinking about what do you want to load the most? Middle of your pec, upper pec, probably your upper pec. So we've got an incline. Then we go on to something flat, so we hit that meat of the pec, and then we can move straight on to delts, because really 6 sets on chest when you're going to hit chest again later on in the week and you're training to failure, makes a lot of sense to keep that, 6, maybe 8 one day, but we'll see it if we get there. Lateral delts, now obviously doing a little bit less volume on your delts total, because we're going to be hitting delts again in 3 days, 3 days after that. So 3 sets on the dumbbell lateral raises, and then just 2 sets on those kind of fully lengthened raises, so we can milk the lateral delts. Then we move on to arms. So you guys are going to see the arms feature a lot in this. I'm trying to grow my arms a little bit, like we said, men's physique, especially when you're in that side pose and you're really lean. This bit for me sinks away, delts sink away, chest sinks away, all of it sinks away. So we just want to fill out those gaps there. So you're going to see arms there, 3 sets on both of those, just to try and really add some extra volume throughout the week. Then we come on to a pull session. Now obviously we've just taxed biceps, so there's no biceps in this pull session, which a lot of people are baffled by, but in this back session, we're just basically going through those ranges of motion that you'd expect, right? So we've got a chest supported prime row, so literally mid-back bias, driving kind of upwards, Then you've got something that's going to come from a high to low. Then you've got something that's going to come from a high to low. So you're working through those ranges of motions that the back works in. And that's all we're doing there, loading through these movements that you can see here. And then just rear delts. Obviously, rear delts don't only pull back, but they also abduct. So you've got to think about that as well when you're just doing your rear delts. Yes, a rear pec deck works, but also it's a big portion in rowing. But also, if you've got overdeveloped rear delts from rowing, you could probably remove this a little bit. But I say neglected, not needed to train my rear delts for a good few years because they were overdeveloped. Now they're about in proportion, so we're going to grow them with everything else. You guys will notice throughout this, I don't do any lower back loading directly from like a deadlift or a hip hinge. That's because I have notoriously bad lower back, disc bulges, injuries every single time I try and run forward with these. So I have a back extension and a 45-degree hip extension. That is my hip hinge because I can load it safely, I can still load it efficiently, and I can still maximize those muscles I'm trying to target in terms of the erectors, but also glutes and hams that you'd be hitting through that hip hinge. Third day on the trot now, you've got to think about if you're training to failure, 2 days in a row is hard. Third day, probably very hard. So that third day for us, or for me, arms and delts, or arms then delts. Arms just being a little bit less energy demanding. Delts a little bit less energy demanding than a big squat, a big press, a big row. So that's why this day is situated on that third training day in a row, because it's actually a little bit less taxing than the rest of them, but it's a big day working on those arms. Short range first, middle range, then the length and range, and then of course just working through the full range of delts, for touching delts for the second time a week, touching arms for the second time a week. Thursday becomes a rest day. You got to have that rest. Thursday is one of my biggest rests. I actually try and put my full rest day there, so I don't do cardio on that day, so I can ready myself for the next 2 days training. And then the next day training on that Friday, which is today, we have a chest and back session just to add a little bit more thickness, add a little bit more volume across the week. This is kind of our second time hitting these now, but also you'll see as you go through this session, it's very much the same thing, right? So we're working on the incline, working on incline press, working on the lower pec, working on an upper back pull, working on a high to low pull, and then working on a row. So we're trying to work through those functions of the lats, and then you're gonna see right at the end here, a little bit of blood flow restriction training on arms. I actually missed this the first week, I didn't see it at the bottom, so this will be the first week that I'll be doing it. I haven't got my blood flow restriction band, so I'm just gonna do normal triceps and extensions, but this is something that adds for the third time this week onto those arms. That's 3 times a week. It's also the third session, so it's got to be the least energy demanding, which is why we've got blood flow restriction training in there, because it's very low impact on the joints after a big heavy week of lifting. Finally, legs. You guys have watched me train legs for a long time, once a week, still doing it. I want to put the majority of my volume to my upper body. I wear shorts on stage, right? There's no need to take away from my overall volume that I could potentially do for the week and allocate more of it to legs. I could do for my own personal sake, but not for my actual competing sake. So for right now, all of 75% of my volume is going towards my upper body, and it's obviously for the reason that I wear my shorts. Fortunately, my legs grow pretty well, so this is going to be enough for me to grow. Working through those ranges of motion that gets the knee joint warm first, but also working the quads and hamstrings in their short range first, because we know if we do hack squats, it's probably going to take away from your ability to leg extension and leg curl. Then we move into our hack squats and leg presses, and then finally just touching up on those adductors and things like that. So you guys would have seen a leg session like this for a while. So that is like one session out of everything. We'll probably revisit this every 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll just show you the increments that we've made in terms of overall training volume, in terms of actual sets amounts. And we'll leave it there because we've been talking for a while, and retention drops after about a minute, so no one's watching this by that rate. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back very soon with another one. In fact, we'll be in Houston, baby. Let's go. Peace.